My name is Andrea. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you are returning, then welcome back. What I do on this channel is I talk about what it's like to be child-free or child-free by choice all through your 20s and all through your 30s, and then maybe deciding to turn that on its head and have a kid at 40. For me personally, I was very career-oriented and driven, and then changed that at 40 when I had my first baby almost 3 years ago, and then now I am 43 and I just had my second baby 14 days ago. We will see if she stays asleep. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of a personal one, is if I knew then when I was 20 and 30 what I knew now, would I have kids earlier? And the answer is yes and no. Having kids so far, although probably the most challenging and eye-opening thing I have ever done, especially as far as like having to look at myself and my self-development and really trying to be conscientious of the type of parent I want to be. I don't think I could be the parent I am now then, although I wish I could have been. So a little bit of my backstory. So just growing up, I always thought, I want to own a business, I want to be entrepreneurial, I want to make a name for myself. And that was certainly encouraged for me growing up. Like, definitely, like, you got to be your own boss. That's how you're going to derive the most success, and success being, climbing some sort of career ladder or being successful as a professional. Never in my growing up experience had success ever been thought about as being a parent necessarily. Now, don't get me wrong, growing up, I did not want to be a parent. I was, ever since I was really young, adamant that I would never have children. I think the first time I remember telling my parents I was never going to have kids, maybe 12 years old. And I think that stemmed from, I don't really know, like, I have some younger brothers that are about 9 and 10 years younger than me. And I think in my perception, being a parent was really hard and a lot of work and not always the most fun, which is true. Being a parent is hard and it is a lot of work and it is not always the most fun, but it is also unbelievably rewarding and one of the most spectacular things I've ever taken on. Now, as a young kid, I certainly couldn't have appreciated that. So through my growing up experience, that was my decision I had made. I was never going to have kids. So I ended up going to college. I went to physical therapy school, became a physical therapist, whatever. Stayed extremely career oriented, knew I wanted to open my own clinic one day. I had met a really wonderful man in the meantime, and he and I got married. Now, we got married when we were 29, and before we got married, we actually started doing premarital counseling, and we did that for about a year. And then after we got married, we continued with the premarital counseling, only now it's marital counseling because we're married, for about 6 or 7 years following that. That was one of the most transformational and, I would say, best investments, because it was really expensive for us at the time. I mean, it was $100 per person, so me and him. We both went individually and we went together, and then there was times that we were actually part of a therapy group. So we were spending, for us, just, I don't know, sometimes $200 to $300 a week on counseling for the both of us. And although it seemed really expensive to us at the time, it was probably some of the best money we ever spent, to be honest. And so throughout the counseling experience and exploring like myself and my own childhood wounds and whatever, I just came to the conclusion that I was not a qualified person to have kids. I was far too self-absorbed, far too selfish. There were goals that I really wanted to achieve, and working 50, 60, sometimes up to 70 hours a week, trying to build my business and having kids, those two things were totally incongruent with each other. And I went to physical therapy school, which is unbelievably expensive. So I came out of school with just so much debt. And if you look up physical therapy school and the expenses. It's pretty outrageous. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just really expensive to go. So coming out of school, I had a $1,600 a month student loan payment. So I had a $1,600 a month student loan payment was at the time just slightly less expensive than my rent, and making, I think at the time when I started, $65,000 a year, which is not chump change. That is a fantastic starting salary. And a ton of it immediately was going to my student loans and to rent and other living expenses. So we really didn't have a lot of, I would say, discretionary income, and we were really focused on saving. So like between having the huge amounts of debt, being entrepreneurial, not really having an income that could really keep up with the expenses. I mean, and this was what? That was in 2009. Now we're in 2025. Like, it's even, from what I understand, it's even harder now for people than it was back then. And so in having like a really hard talk with ourselves, my husband and I, our counselor, and then also doing a lot of self-reflection, it was like, I don't have the personal bandwidth or the desire to have kids. We don't have the financial situation to have kids. And my entrepreneurial self wants to spend so much time on work and building a business that was incongruent with being able to be the mother that I thought kids deserved, which is somebody who is available and around and who wants to be there. And I didn't have any of those things. So that was who I was then. And then fast forward to when I became 39 and I had achieved most of I got a call in the middle of the video, so hopefully this just continues. So, but fast forward to when I was 39 years old. So I started when I was 29. Well, I started being a physical therapist, like a licensed physical therapist, when I was 27. Got married at 29, opened my own clinic at 30, and then by the time I was 39, I had achieved all of my career aspirations. I had opened a clinic. I successfully managed it. It went from a clinic of 2, me and an office manager, to 10. I had 2 office managers. I had 2 physical therapists plus myself. I had a physical therapy assistant. I had techs. I mean, it was just such a wonderful experience being with and growing that business and getting to both manage and mentor the people that got to be my direct reports. That was like one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. Not as rewarding as being a mom though, which is kind of interesting. But if I would have had a kid earlier in my life, when I was 30 or, even early 30s, I was not in the same situation I am in now, where now I have the option to stay home and I'm doing it. My husband and I have a much more solid foundation of a relationship, which is wonderful. He and I spent, I'm not kidding you, we spent the first 10 years of our marriage really talking about, we talked about having kids probably at least weekly. Like, we talked about it all the time, because when you choose not to have kids, it's not a decision like you make once. It's a decision you make over and over and over again. Like, once you have kids, you can't unmake that decision. But when you're choosing not to have kids, you kind of revisit it and you continue to choose that, right? So my husband and I, we would continuously talk about, what would it mean to have kids? Did we have the capacity for kids? Did we have the relationship, the stability that we thought was required to consider having kids? Just some of these really, really deep questions. And it wasn't really until we evolved ourselves as individuals and as a couple that we finally got to the place where it's like, we both have the time, effort, and energy. We're both in a place in our relationship to have kids. And one of the other things is that he and I had spoken so often about what having kids would mean and how we would handle it and what our roles would be, that when we finally had kids, there's no arguments or discussions or disagreements about, how would we want to guide them? How do we feel about discipline? Would we ever do an allowance? Just all these questions that sometimes you don't think about, we had been talking about for 10 years. Did we, and then also what my expectation of his role as a father would be, and what his expectation of me as a mother would be. And we talked about it until we, and we finally came to this place where we are very congruent and in sync. One really sweet story I can share is that, after my first was born, my daughter, he said, you can feed her and you can hold her and you can snuggle her and you can do all of these things. The only thing I can do is take care of you and make sure that her diapers are changed. So for the first month of my daughter's life, I didn't even know what newborn baby poop looked like, because he changed every single one of her diapers, because he's like, that's what I can do to support you, because you're having to do so much of the heavy lifting as the new mom, and you're recovering and so he demonstrated to me how much he appreciated me for the things that I get to do. I was gonna say have to do, but I get to do these things. And the way that he stepped up is in the beginning, and actually throughout her, the time that she wore diapers, he would change the vast majority of the diapers, because I was doing the vast majority of everything else as far as like care and feeding and nurturing and just a lot of things. And so it's been a really wonderful experience. So the question is, if I could do it all again, would I have children earlier in my life? And the answer is no, I wouldn't have, because I think I had children for me at the perfect time in my life. But what makes me a little bit sad is that I wish I would have been the person I am now much earlier in my life. And I could have had children earlier, and I could have had more capacity, and I could have had, a different set of priorities. But at the same time, I'm also being realistic about where I was in life, as far as like having gone to school, having taken on loads of student debt, wanting to be entrepreneurial and wanting to achieve those goals, which looking back now, like I said, were wonderful. It's such a wonderful time. And I'm so glad I did it, because I have this experience I can draw on, and I have this professional background, and I love being able to engage with people on a professional level. And I can't tell you how special it is to me to have these two kids. It's the most wonderful thing I've ever experienced. And it's the hardest thing so far. Maybe I'll get into it later. It's also the hardest thing I've ever done. And it's beyond worth it. One of the things I tell people sometimes is, I thought I knew how to be tired. Right? Because I was in college and I was like, oh my gosh, I've never worked so hard in my life. Like, college was so hard. And then you get to grad school and you're like, college was easy, but grad school, this is tough. I'm so tired. I study all the time. Like, so much is riding on my ability to graduate and pass my boards. And then you start working and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I've never been so tired, because I get to work at 7. I sometimes stay until 7, and then I have chart notes to do when I get home. So work is never really done. And then you open your own business and you think, oh my gosh, being an employee I thought I was tired. But now that I have my own business, I've never been so tired in my life, because you're waking up early, you're staying late, you're doing things on the weekends, you're doing marketing, you're always representing yourself out there. You're taking employee texts at like 4 a.m, and they're letting you know they can't come in because they're sick. Things like that. And then you have a kid and you go, oh my gosh, I thought I knew how to be tired before. And this is a level of like tired I've never experienced. And I wouldn't take it back for anything. So it's just so interesting how we go through life and we evolve and things change, and our perspectives change, and who we are changes, and our priorities change. So anyway, I hope this was an interesting talk, which is, no, I wouldn't change a thing. I would still have a kid at 40. but I wish I would have been earlier sooner. But at least I got ready and did the work when I did. So it worked out the way that it did. I'd love your comments, questions, or feedback. If you think this is interesting, please go ahead and subscribe. Thanks so much. Bye.